Oh, I say. It's time once again for the Spearsy Spin with Mike Spears.
That's a brief clip regarding the Democratic senators attempting to have the President of the United States declared mentally incompetent. The doctor speaking is Dr. Nicole Saphire. She's a Fox News contributor, and we will hear more from Dr. Saphire later in tonight's show. Well, good evening all, and welcome to the Spearsy Spin. Tonight is our Part 2 report on depression, PTSD, and suicide. Last night on the show, we talked about Stevie Ryan, who was a beautiful 33-year-old woman who had committed suicide. She had a professional career as a VH1 TV personality, had her own YouTube show called Chill, and she also did impersonations on other shows as well. Stevie Ryan was actually the catalyst for our two-part report, as suicide's becoming more prevalent in our society. Tonight, we'll break down the components of suicide, with the two top being depression and PTSD, and we'll also break down suicide itself. Before we begin this evening, the first thing I want to say to everyone listening is this. There are no false cries when you hear someone talking about ending their life. Anytime you suspect or you know that someone wishes to harm themselves, make an immediate call to a mental health professional. If they're not available, a local hospital or law enforcement, or if you're near an active mental health facility. If nothing else, call 911 and tell them what's going on. They'll know what to do. Never play the wait-and-see game, because tragically, it sometimes ends with you saying, if only I had, if only I said, if only I stayed, if only. So, professional help immediately and always. Now, we're talking about suicide for a moment, and people left behind when someone takes their own life. Quite often they have feelings of regret, sometimes unrelenting anger, and usually a deep-rooted psychological pain. With depression being the number one cause of most suicides today, let's take a look at contributing factors that begin the onset of depression. Well, first and foremost would be the death of someone that's close. Quite often we see folks who have problems from that, obviously, and some people handle death easier than others. But that's one of the first things we're looking at here. Next is drugs and alcohol when they're abused, and they can become the cornerstone of depression. A major resentment from being taken advantage of or humiliated. Next is the big F, failure. For some, the word doesn't even exist. However, some folks, when confronted by failure, they succumb to dark thoughts. Bullying. More and more, we hear of the depressive actions being taken on by those who are the brunt of bullies. If you know of someone being bullied, stop it. Period. Get involved. A feeling of disappointment or not being accepted by peers and family, feelings of being shunned by society in general, or feelings of being lost with no hope of better days. A feeling of fleeting helplessness. Some folks in prison or pending criminal or legal litigation. All these things can cast a dark shadow and edge us closer to possible depression. Physical, verbal, and sexual abuse. These also are becoming more and more prevalent in today's society, which One would suspect, being in the 21st century, that it would be just the opposite.
On Friday, February 25th, 1994, 17-year-old Alfonso Edwards wrecked the first car our father ever bought him. After leaving the scene of the accident and arriving home, he received a phone call from his girlfriend stating that she could possibly be pregnant. In an act of hopelessness and distress, my brother and only sibling walked downstairs to the den of our home and shot himself in the face. The car accident was only a minor fender bender, and his girlfriend wasn't pregnant. Each year, 5,000 teenagers commit suicide, and for every death, there are 50 to 100 attempts. We must put a stop to this unspoken tragedy. We can be aware of the warning signals, like sudden changes in behavior and constant mood swings. For more information, please visit www.teensuicide.us and let your teen know that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
As patriotic Americans, we all share in our love for the liberties we enjoy and an appreciation for the high cost of our freedom. But while some wounds are obvious, many are unseen. The VA says over half of our brave warriors who have served our military post 9/11 suffer from symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. This has led to rising divorce rates and, tragically, record increases in suicide amongst our proud military and veteran community. As time marches on, the numbers only increase. There is help. Together we can provide hope to those who have served us so bravely, but carry the unseen wounds of war. To learn more about how PTSD is affecting our military and how you can help provide the hope they so desperately need, go to ptsdusa.org. ptsdusa.org.
Welcome back to Fox and Friends. Well, more than 24 Democrats, these right here, backing a new bill to declare President Trump mentally unfit for office. I don't know if any of them are actually psychiatrists. Our next guest says this may be unethical and is at least very irresponsible. Dr. Nicole Saphire joins us now to explain. So I presume none of these 25 members have performed a psychiatric exam on our commander-in-chief. You would say, therefore, their ability to deem him fit or unfit is irresponsible.
It is irresponsible. You know, I find it interesting that you have non-healthcare professionals actually giving medical diagnoses for someone that they actually haven't examined. And even if they are healthcare professionals, which I have seen commentary in the media of healthcare professionals throwing around medical diagnoses about our president, you can't do that, and you shouldn't do that. I mean, the Goldwater rule, which we were talking about during the break.
Really interesting, yeah.
Extremely interesting. You'd think that they would have learned their lesson.
So talk about that. In 1964, something similar happened to Barry Goldwater when he was a candidate for president. What happened?
Right, because they thought he had extreme political views. A group of psychiatrists got together.
He was a conservative.
Exactly,
anyway.
Exactly. Extremism on both sides. I think people start throwing around mental illness diagnoses. But what happened was essentially a magazine polled a group of psychiatrists. It called him essentially mentally unfit. And, you know, he didn't get the presidency, but he was able to sue that magazine, and he won that lawsuit for libel. And so, therefore, the American Psychiatric Association came out with this rule saying it's unethical. You cannot make commentary on living public figures that you have not examined.
It's a really interesting piece. I love learning little nuggets from history. In 1964, it was Fact magazine. They wrote this piece that psychiatrists said he was unfit. He sued him afterwards and won $1 million in damages for defamation, which is libel in print. So you said you've seen, you know, other networks or other places where they're starting to put. Is it basically the same thing when you broadcast psychiatrists or doctors who are trying to assess President Trump?
Yeah, you know, facts are stubborn little things, and it's much easier to surmise based on guessing what someone's thinking than actually to diagnose someone. And, you know, personally and professionally, I'm not going to sit here and try and diagnose our president. That's not my role. I do wonder at what point our president of the nation, his family, including his young child, they are attacked every day for their intelligence, their character, and their physical characteristics. At what point do we say maybe some of this is his defense mechanism in acting out or a compartmentalization? You know, anywhere else in any other arena, people would be criticized for bullying and slander. However, for some reason, it's now becoming acceptable to be attacking our nation's leader and his family.
And what do I feel like whatever was said about Barry Goldwater, I haven't seen the article, is probably tame compared to what's said. I mean, you look in the media and what's said about President Trump right now.
Absolutely. I mean, what happened with Kathy Griffin? I mean, can you imagine if we did that to someone else? If someone else was holding a head or a dead head or a bloody head of someone, I mean, that is bullying to its extreme.
Absolutely. Dr. Nicole Saphire, thank you very much.
Thanks for being
Usually
here.
we get medicine and tips. Today we got history. She's
right.
a well-rounded individual. Thank you very much.
Many folks have unresolved issues from their past, and these things keep coming back, and they can wear a person down, and that can sometimes be a gateway to depression. Violence, assault, rape, people personally victimized, child molestation, and even kidnapping. Now, these are the most frequent triggers of depression that we just went through. Folks who are witness to a murder and sometimes multiple murders, this is a pretty easy one to figure out as far as a trigger for depression, but also PTSD. Accidents, chronic pain, or extreme emotional and intense pain can also be a precursor for depression. A major loss, or perhaps even a terminal illness. Divorce, separation, breakup of a relationship, loss of a child, loss of a custody case, all these things. So these causes that we've just brought to the table, well, they're not all inclusive, yet they're on the list of triggers for depression. Why is treating depression so very important? Well, it's because chronic or untreated depression is the number one cause for suicide. Why do some people make that grave and dark decision to take their own lives? Despair? The wanton desire to die, maybe? To get a clear perspective of this, we need to look at those who have attempted suicide and failed.
At age 10, John was the first person in his family to make the honor roll at school. When he was 17, John was the first person in his family to be an Eagle Scout. Upon turning 18, John was the first person in his class to graduate from boot camp. At age 19, John graduated from airborne training. He was first in his class. At 20, John was the first of his siblings to get married. When he was 21, John was a member of the 1st Airborne Unit to enter into Fallujah, Iraq. At age 22, John was the first member of his unit to get the Bronze Star for his actions in combat. At 23, John returned home from Iraq and gave his parents their first grandchild. At age 24, John was the first person in his battalion to commit suicide. John, like many other military men and women, suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. Nearly 40,000 military men and women in current service have been diagnosed with PTSD. If you think you suffer from PTSD, please go to mentalhealth.va.gov. There are support groups all over the United States. People like you, feeling like you, sharing like you want to share. Let us place hope before hopelessness.
And one of the most reported reasons for those attempts is this: just to not be here anymore. So we've listed the most obvious concerns associated with suicide, but there is more to suicide than just this list. The answer here is yes to this issue of suicide, but it is complex in nature. For instance, we have something called mild chronic depression, and it has fewer symptoms than major depression. With depression, symptoms are prevalent for a long period of time and many times lasting for years. However, a combination of talk therapy, or what we like to call psychotherapy, and medication, which we like to call psychotropic drug therapy, Well, that can be very effective in treating persistent depressive disorders such as dysthymia. Now, the story changes a bit when we come to the heavy hitter in the depressive disorders category, and that is severe depression. This is the stage in which a qualified psychologist or psychiatrist needs to be on board. It is here that we quite often find individuals living in actual pain because of their own existence. And sadly, for some, the pain becomes too much. Those suffering from a severe state of depression tend to think in unconventional terms, and in many cases, foreshadowing untrue realities. In short, their thinking is skewed and can no longer be considered coherent. One of the biggest issues facing sufferers of depression today is the stigma generated by it and the societal disingenuous reactions because of it. Understand that those folks suffering from depression, especially severe depression, they cannot be held accountable for having distorted thoughts. I would hope that anyone who has, for instance, itchy psoriasis would not be thought less of because of that affliction, and this theory holds true for those suffering from depression. It is just the nature of the beast, the nature of their disease. Depression is almost always treatable. Talk with your friends, your relatives, and neighbors, and if you think, some of them might be experiencing depression-like symptoms, and more importantly, if they are, make a call to get them help.
If the black dog of depression makes you feel like the saddest soul on earth, you're not alone. Around 350 million people share this debilitating but treatable condition. If you're worried about someone, ask if they're okay. If you're not doing so well yourself, ask for help. There is no shame in doing so. The only shame is missing out on life. So get help, be helped, and always hold on to hope.
Now we turn our attention to those afflicted by psychotic and/or schizophrenic issues. Typically, psychotic and schizophrenic mental health issues appear quite often to be blatantly obvious. Once you've been alerted to these conditions and you feel the person may be a threat to themselves or others, an immediate call for help is the correct course of action. These conditions are treatable, and they have had amazing successes. Amazing. Suicide is unpredictable, and, for those that are left behind, those that are left living with the aftermath of suicide often experience long-term emotional pain. While, we're never going to truly understand the mental mechanics associated with the wanton will to end one's own life, many can take solace, though, from the knowledge that has been gleaned over the years from case studies. Sadly, there will always be those who are left behind because of suicide, because we'll never be able to stop every suicide. I wished we could. For the person who has died, the final chapter of their life has ended. For those still here, however, a new life lesson begins. Perhaps, a way to help move forward is to know that the anger you feel, the guilt that you hold on to, is normal, up to a point. If these feelings last a year or more, they should be addressed by a qualified counselor or psychologist. Finding closure for those left behind can seem paramount to looking for one cherry tree in a 1,000-acre forest. When someone close to us commits suicide, it is an immediate separation from yourself and that person. depending on how close your relationship was with the one that's passed, we know that there can be separation anxiety for some, and that must be addressed. Again, this should be approached by a mental health professional that will help you work through your initial anxiety phase. Over the years, those who have studied psychology and behavioral sciences can say unequivocally that about 95% of people who commit suicide are suffering from a mental illness at the time of their death. We can also tell you with 99.9% certainty that the most common mental illness associated with suicide is depression. Mental illnesses, starting with depression and extending into schizophrenia and even bipolar disorders, that's just to name the front runners, are the cause for the majority of suicides. Genetically predisposed to depression, to date, there is research to suggest that there is a genetic component to mood disorders, but that's something that we leave up to the histologist, the neurologist, the endocrinologist, and the National Institute of Mental Health, as I have no education in that field to even offer an opinion. Well, we need to learn what the symptoms of depression are. And, a great resource for learning more about this mental affliction can be researched at the National Institute of Mental Health. Now, if you or someone you know is depressed, please immediately get help. For those who are left behind because of suicide, know this. Untreated mental illnesses, schizophrenia, depression, bipolar disorder, can cause suicide. And a personal final note from me before credits. If someone close to you has committed suicide and you are still not dealing with the anger and other feelings of guilt, here is the best solution that I found to deal with this. Number 1, seek out a qualified counselor to discuss your feelings with. Number 2, donate money each month to any organization of your choice that is currently doing research on mental illness. You can donate to your favorite organization in the name of the person you've lost. This way, you're keeping that person close and helping to find cures for others. Well, folks, that's our show. Actually, I just read what I'd written many, many years ago for a talk I gave about this exact subject. I need, though, to take a minute to thank the following for their input years ago on my initial writing on this piece. And I start with my mentor, Dr. Louis DeZoritz. He was the director of the Binghamton Psychiatric Center in Binghamton, New York. Thanks out to him. Dr. Otto Berliner. He was professor emeritus of psychology at SUNY, Alfred, New York. He also authored the book called The Cobbler of Normandy. It received the Best Historical Book Award from the New Book Reviews in 2007. Now, Otto actually escaped from Budapest as a child as he was being loaded on a train headed to Dachau, Germany. That was headed toward the prison camp. And Otto also had on his left forearm numbers tattooed. And of course, my friend Dr. George Miller, he's a psychologist, retired from Ithaca, New York. George has provided me with a lot of great information about so many things. Well, folks, there we are. That's our show, and I hope you got something out of it. I really do. We'll be back Friday, and of course we'll be back with heavy-hitting politics and finding out more about the Russia story. No, I'm sick of Russia. Thanks, folks. Take care. We'll see everybody on Friday.
Well, Mike has once again delivered a jolly good show. Bob's your uncle. Subscribing to the Spearsy Spin is easy peasy lemon squeezy. Just click the subscribe button.